What is going on, everybody? I go by Philly Mike, and this is the Philly Talk Podcast. And today we got a special guest, Maaddi. Go ahead and introduce yourself for people who don't know about you.
What's up, man? How you doing? You got it all up there. AP, NFL, Eagles, Phillies, beat writer, and you can hear me on 97.5 The Fanatic weekends. I do my sports show. I do my Faith on the Field show on 97.5 The Fanatic, and I do it across the country. You can also find that at faithonthefieldshow.com. And, man, it's good to be with you because it was other than this, I'd be outside shoveling snow right now, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it, Mike.
Hey, you and me both. Got home a little bit ago, and my wife's like, "You're going to take care of that?" I'm like, "Give me a little bit. I got to talk my Eagles." So with that being said, let's get into it. Before we get into the heavy discussion about Carson Wentz and the future of the Philadelphia Eagles at quarterback, let's get into some news that kind of just broke. DeSean Jackson on his Instagram pretty much said goodbye. Thank you, Philly. On to the new chapter. What is your take on that? To me, it's not that surprising because of the money situation we're in, but give me your take on that and some possible other candidates that people don't think is going to be let go that might be let go.
Yeah, as far as DeSean, that was just a matter of time. We knew that was happening. Alshon Jeffrey's another one that I would anticipate happening soon. There are some other veterans. Mike, I'll be honest with you, it wouldn't shock me no matter who doesn't come back at this point. This is a rebuilding team. They got a lot of financial issues. They took a big cap hit with Carson Wentz's contract. Whatever you can do to start to fix that cap situation so you can help yourself in 2022 and going forward, because I don't think anybody can look at this team realistically and think they're a playoff team next year. So you really want to fix yourself cap-wise for the future. So whether that's restructuring guys, Fletcher Cox might be in that category, whether it's moving on from some guys. I think, Mike, we all know Zach Ertz is probably going to be on his way out sooner rather than later. And then Malik Jackson, Javon Hargrave, anybody who's making a lot of money, maybe Brandon Brooks. I don't even know about Lane Johnson at this point. I would not rule out anything, to be honest with you. Now, there's going to be different scenarios where some guys can come back, restructure, push money back, whatever it may be. They still got to field a team. They still got to field a competitive football team. And you still got to protect Jalen Hurts a little bit. But, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see more names on their way out the door.
Yeah, I agree. A guy like Derek Barnett comes a mind exactly for the simple fact he's owed $10 million for 2021. And doing my little research, I believe if we end up cutting bait with him, we save all 10 million of that. And that's a guy who was on his 5th-year contract, showed potential, but between injuries and just lack of doing it consistently, it's like I think he's spent his time in Philly and I think it's over. When you talk about guys like Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks, I think you got to weigh money and age. If you really think this team is going to start competing in 2 or 3 years, well, then 30 years old is already too old, because by the time you're starting to compete, now you're talking about 32, 33. So I think that plays a factor too, where you look at Brandon Brooks, Lane Johnson, and guys of that sort. And it's just going to be a weird season. But like you said, we got to get from negative, I think, 49 we were at last. I believe DeSean Jackson will save us about $4.5 million. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, it's not the full salary. You're right. It's somewhere around there in the $4.5 million range.
Yeah, so we got to do what we got to do. But like you said, we got to field a team for Jalen Hurts. Let's get into this Carson Wentz thing, because the ball was dropped yesterday, what we got from and all that. And it was a shock across Twitter, Philly Nation, all that stuff. We all knew that Carson Wentz was going to be dealt, though. I mean, there were some people saying the longer this kind of played out, maybe we're going to just ask him to come to training camp. A lot of beat writers were dead set he's going to go. It's just a matter of when. What was your take on the situation of him going for what we got from him?
I think given the circumstances, the situation, him coming off the worst season of his career, it doesn't surprise me that this is what you were able to bring in return for a guy making that much money, about to enter a 4-year, $128 million contract, because you can't be sure, you can't be convinced that Carson's going to go back to 2017 Carson or even December 2019 Carson. The last time he played was 2020. So teams are looking at that. Now, of course, he ends up with Frank Reich, where he thrived with Press Taylor and guys who were familiar with him and know him and should be confident that they can get him in a right situation, get him back on track. But when I spoke to a couple front office executives when I was at the Super Bowl a couple weeks ago, guys from other teams in the league, two guys who really didn't need a quarterback. They weren't going to be in the market. One guy said, I would expect him to get traded for anything in the first round outside top 5. Then the other guy said, no, I wouldn't look at 6 to 16, but I would look at 16 to 32. Well, if he plays the 70% and they make the playoffs, or the 75% and don't make the playoffs, the Eagles are going to get a first-round pick plus the third this year. So it falls in line with what I thought. So I'm surprised that some people are like thinking that this was a horrific deal. Now, from that standpoint, I don't think it was a terrible deal. But the reason that we got to this point, man, like when 2 years ago you give him that contract, 3 years ago you win the Super Bowl, and here we are, Doug's not here, Carson's not here, the team is in shambles. Yeah, that's all on the organization. That's just a failure top to bottom.
I agree. Because when you put that pen to paper and you're making that franchise changing decision, that long-term decision, I don't understand how you could botch it in this situation. I mean, look at the other quarterbacks that are young. You know, I'm not saying Odell succeeded in Cleveland, but they went out and got an Odell for Baker. Kyler Murray got a D-Hop. Josh Allen got a Stephon Diggs, and it's little things like that. Compare with the offensive line, compare with you just putting them in the best situation. And to me, Jalen Hurts is going to be the quarterback now. And if you look at it in 2020 hindsight, maybe it was okay. But at the moment, second round, where you can build this team around a guy who, like you said, December Carson Wentz kind of drugged this team to the playoffs, how we go ahead and take a top name quarterback. I'm not saying he was top of his class, but he's a highly regarded name, second in a Heisman, a locker room guy, a guy that the city of Philadelphia would automatically jump on if Carson Wentz had a little bit of struggle. And there were many things that went into Carson's struggle. It was not just him. He did have his fair share in it. But what was your take on that pick at the time when they drafted Jalen Hurts?
I completely misread it, and I'll be honest with you, because when they made that pick, I'm like, all right, they're looking at a guy that they can use in a Taysom Hill type of role, even though they're a different player. They want to have a cheap backup in case Carson goes down, because we've seen 3 times he didn't finish the season out, and one of them was the cheap shot. So I bought into that, man. I bought into it, and I was wrong. I was flat out wrong, because that decision it just ultimately led to what was a collapse in Carson's performance last year. And to think back on it, when the team needed anything, any kind of weapon, anything but a backup quarterback, and you take a backup quarterback with the 53rd pick, and like you said, coming off of where Carson finished 19 season, right? He finished it high. He finished it on top. He had a tremendous December, carrying guys like Josh Perkins and Deontay Burnett and Greg Ward and Robert Davis and guys I can't even name or remember to the playoffs, and then takes a cheap shot. Now, all of a sudden, instead of riding that high going, he's back. He's back. Let's build around him. Let's bring in guys. And instead they go in, well, they draft Jalen Reagor, and it turns out Justin Jefferson was a better pick this year. I'm not going to write Jalen Reagor off yet, but that would have been the better pick only this year. And you can argue, well, we don't know if Justin Jefferson in this offense, in this system, would have thrived either. But yeah, to look back on it now, taking Jalen Hurts was just a bad move for the organization. And now we're here partly because of that, maybe mainly because of that. So to even think that they may consider taking another quarterback this year, like y'all better ride with the guy, because you brought him in, you traded your franchise quarterback. Let's see what he can do.
Hey, you pretty much quoted my video I dropped last night. So I went live to discuss with all my followers. Shout out to everybody who's watching this. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, of course, if you're new. But I dropped the video after I went live because I wanted to get everybody's live reaction, and it was crazy. But when I dropped the video, I said the same thing. The number 2, the second round pick that you spent on Jalen Hurts ultimately was the demise of Carson Wentz. Now, a lot of other things went into it, but that was the start of it. So for you to think, I'm going to take Jalen Hurts in the second round, I'm confident in why I'm taking him. It ruins your quarterback. You send him out, and then you don't even give this guy an opportunity for 1 year. We saw 4 games. We saw some good. We saw some bad. But 4 games. If you are in rebuild mode, you don't got to go right now. You got to see what this guy can have with a possible healthy offensive line, with a maybe blue chip player like a Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith, who might really be there at 6. That's something we got to get. We got to get blue chip players in here, whether it's Jalen Hurts at quarterback or somebody else. We haven't had Pro Bowlers other than Carson in the last couple years, and that goes to show we can't draft. You can't build a roster year in and year out through the free agency. It's too expensive. They're at their highest bidding point once they hit free agency. You're going to type overpay for some of these players. You got to sprinkle that in with drafting, which we failed to do. And that's pretty much what I said in my video. Now on to Jalen Hurts a little bit before we talk about some Howie Roseman. Do you think Jalen Hurts has the capabilities to be a successful quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles?
I think he's got talent, he's got ability, he's got character, poise, and leadership. So he's got the intangibles. He's got to do more. He's got to show more, but I can't judge him on 3 bad games last year or 1 good game. I got to see what can he do with, one, a new coaching staff. There's a new coaching staff, and one of those guys, the quarterback coach, and Brian Johnson, has familiarity with him. So maybe that'll help him, right? Let's see what this new offense, this new system, how he can work in it. And then, like you mentioned, healthy offensive line, more weapons at wide receiver. Jalen Reagor's going to be going in a year 2. Maybe he can blossom and develop and show why the Eagles took him. Maybe even J.J. Arcega-Whiteside could be rescued from bust status. I see you covering your face, and I hear you, right? At this point, right, he's going into year 3. You invested a second-round pick in him. Eagles are going to keep him around and try and see if they can get anything out of him, right? John Hightower, Quez Watkins, all of this young talent. Maybe they do use a number 6 overall pick on a wide receiver. I don't know if they're going to go that route. But yes, surround him with talent. Try and build around him and see if he can be that guy. And you know what, man? I don't even know if 1 year is enough to make that decision on Jalen Hurts. Like, he can have, maybe he has a so-so season. Maybe he's got some ups and downs, but this is really essentially like his rookie season part 2. They didn't have any OTAs last year. They didn't have any of that. So this is the first time he's going to go through that this year, assuming the NFL allows him to have that. And I know a lot of it will be virtual, but I'm excited to see what he can do. I've always been partial to quarterbacks who can run, who could do it with their legs. I know he certainly can do that. But then you look around and you look at, well, who are the Super Bowl winning quarterbacks? And they, it's guys like Tom Brady who sit in the pocket. But Patrick Mahomes won 2 years ago, and he's a guy who could do some damage with his legs. I don't know that Jalen Hurts will ever be that guy yet, but I don't think they know that Jalen Hurts will be that guy. So they got to allow him to develop, to blossom, and see what he could do.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I can sit here and still say, I see the potential in Jalen Hurts and I like him. And someone will say, well, in the same sentence, you said you didn't like that pick, because you got to put the context in. It was the time, the money we already invested in him, but it's over with now. So I do like the play. I can honestly say both sides and have a good argument.
Yeah, because it's too late, right? Like, if we continue to harp on the pick was made. No matter how much we don't like the pick, it don't matter. The pick was made. The player's here. Carson isn't. So you evaluate what's in front of you.
I agree. Now, you said about the wide receiver. Let's talk about that 6th pick for a little bit. Do you have a sense you think where the Eagles will go? I mean, I know it's Howie Roseman. He can legitly go any route, but what are you hearing for that 6th pick around the Eagles' name?
Yeah, I honestly, I would probably be more surprised if it is one of those stud wide receivers, because Howie's always going to look for something else. We've been conditioned to see that Howie's going to go a different direction. The guy that we all think they should take, they don't end up taking. They need cornerbacks, right? Whether it's Surtain or someone else, they need cornerbacks. If Sewell, the offensive lineman, everybody's got him going, I think, ahead of them, right? What if he falls to 6? You can, their philosophy is you win on the offensive line and on the defensive line. Mm-hmm. And they don't really invest in wide receivers until you've seen recently, and they do it with guys in the later round or last year in Reagor's case. So I don't know, man. I wouldn't even shock me if they went quarterback, which I don't think they should do, but that wouldn't surprise me either.
Hey, I agree 100% with you. When I look at the how Howie Roseman's been doing it, I really can't judge anything. And I agree. Penny Swool, I can never say his last name.
I
He's
know.
a guy that if he falls, you got to take him. I think he's a generational offensive lineman, really can play anywhere. But the left side, left tackle is where you need him to be good, especially with so many right-handed quarterbacks, blind side, all that stuff. So it's definitely going to be interesting. But like we talked about, a quarterback there, I feel like just pushes the same thing down the road, and it makes us look like we don't know what we're doing as an organization, even though pretty much everything that's been happening seems to make us look like we're dysfunctional when it comes from the top to the bottom. But I will say this: if we don't go quarterback, you always have that possible first round pick for the Colts next year. And if we are a bad football team because of not just Jalen Hurts maybe not having the best year, but because we're going to have a lot of young guys losing a lot of these older veterans, we can find ourselves in the top 10 next year. And then you at least gave Jalen Hurts a chance to say, he just don't got it. And like you said, maybe he even needs more than a year, but you can tell if the trajectory is pointing up, but you see the team is failing around him, you can still judge a quarterback on a bad team, a la Deshaun Watson. The Texans won one more game. No, they won the same amount of games as the Eagles, 4 games. You know what I mean? And Deshaun Watson had 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. And if you look at Pro Football Focus, they're trying to argue that it's one of the best quarterback seasons ever with what he had to work with. No defense, no run game, switching coaches and stuff. And I do give Deshaun Watson credit. He's a bad man. He's a really good quarterback. But you can have that bad team, but good quarterback play and assess it. So it's going to be interesting to see how the 2021 season looks. But I know we won't be talking about Carson Wentz going forward too much, but what is your take on his situation with Indy? Do you think he's going to be able to regain something? Maybe not 17, but maybe 19. But how do you think he's going to fall in with Indy and the supporting cast?
I think he'll have some success there because Frank Reich is a terrific head coach. I really like his system. That's what Carson thrived in before they went and changed it around and started trying to play with the Nick Foles system after they won the Super Bowl. So I think he'll have success there. I like their offensive line. I think they got to shore some things up on the left side over there, but they do have some question marks at wide receiver. T.Y. Hilton's a free agent, so he doesn't have that stud number 1 wide receiver. Maybe that's something that they address in the draft. Maybe they address that in the free agency. But they're a good football team that went to the playoffs with Phillip Rivers. With Phillip Rivers in the last year of his NFL career on a decline, and although he was essentially a game manager, I think Carson Wentz can do a little bit more than Phillip Rivers, and in this system, in this offense, have a lot of success. They're in a tough conference, the AFC, so you still got to go through Kansas City. And Buffalo is a team on the rise. We saw that this year, so it's going to be tough for Indianapolis to get to a Super Bowl. I wouldn't rule it out, but I wouldn't bet on it, not just yet.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I'm not going to say Super Bowl, AFC Championship, but he got the team around him where if he just tries to manage the game and not do this, home run hit and play and letting stuff get in his head, which I don't think he will. I think he's going to come around and, Eagle Nation, he's looking good over there. They're going to automatically say, well, you see, well, guess what? Their supporting cast is a little bit better overall when you look at the defense and the offensive line. And even though they don't got that many wide receivers, we don't either at this moment. So they still have almost every aspect better. So I wish him best. I love the guy. You know what I mean? I was on his wagon for a while, but 2020, you had to come through the light. But there was a lot of things. Let me ask you about the coaching staff. You said you like the coaching staff. Do you believe that a guy like Nick Sirianni is going to be able to get the train going the right way early, or do you think there's going to be some struggles? I'm saying with just getting the system in and just seeing how 2020, not just as like a win and lose, and just from the XO standpoint.
I like Nick Sirianni, but I don't think we know enough about him to be confident in him as a head coach. So I'm very interested to see what he can do. And I really want to see what this NFL offseason is going to look like, because are they going to allow players to come in and do everything on the field and allow a new head coach like that to implement his system fully and get to see guys out there on the field, on grass, in practice? And I think there's a lot of there's a lot of upside with Nick Sirianni. We've seen him have success in the past with 3 different quarterbacks in Indy. He's had some success with the Chargers previously before that. So I think there's a lot of upside. They got a nice young staff, a lot of energy, a lot of guys who are hungry. But at the same time, they haven't shown it yet. They haven't proven it as head coaches. So when you know, I can't – I look back to when Doug Peterson came in, and I wasn't as down on him as most, but I didn't think he was going to win a Super Bowl in year 2 either. So I don't anticipate Nick Sirianni winning a Super Bowl in year 2 or year 3, not with this team and not with the organizational structure that they have and the hierarchy and the issues and the environment that I keep hearing about, that people keep talking about, the toxicity and the culture and everything else. I think that might be a bigger deterrent for Nick Sirianni than himself.
All right, couple more questions, then we'll get out of here. Do you believe that all the locker room noise that were surrounding Carson Wentz from all the anonymous sources, do you think that that was a legit thing? Now, this is just speculation, but I mean, you get more information told you than what I would hear. I'm only hearing what you guys tell us, you know what I mean? But in that sense of the toxicity when it comes to the locker room and the, you know, being hard-headed, a little bit hard to coach, picking favoritism and stuff that you heard, do you believe that that was true and the locker room is going to be a lot better without him? Or do you think it was more exaggerated?
I think it was blown way out of proportion. I think when you put 1 or 2 anonymous people who have a reason or an agenda for not wanting somebody to be there, or want to talk down about somebody, and then it gets blown up into fact and gospel. And then I hear things like, I'm on the radio and people call in and like, oh, Carson was a cancer in a locker room. Like, are you kidding me? Why don't you ask Jason Kelce? He's got no reason to lie. Jason Kelsey's about one of the most honest people I ever met. If he didn't like Carson, maybe he'd blow it off the question. But when he goes and his praise is effusive of Carson Wentz, that tells you something. When Fletcher Cox, who's on the other side of the ball, is effusive in his praise of Carson Wentz, that should tell you something. But I think people have an agenda sometimes. They're looking for a reason to be negative. They're looking for a reason to be critical. So you go and find somebody who's got something bad to say. I'm not going to name any names, but there's guys out there who will say something negative, right? And then you run with it. And all of a sudden that becomes the majority when it's really a very small minority. Now, in Carson's situation, maybe he could have handled the locker room better. Like maybe he could have been a better leader across the board. He's a very shy, introverted, keeps to himself kind of character, right? He's very uncomfortable and awkward in front of the media. And I think sometimes that translates in front of other players in a locker room that he doesn't have as much in common with. So maybe some guys will bash him because he's not out there drinking beers and he's not a party guy with them. But at the same time, you got to be able to relate to those guys too as well. So you have to be a leader for the entire team. And maybe that's something that he can work on, because I'll never say anybody's perfect. I'm not perfect. Carson isn't perfect. Nobody's perfect, right? I'm sure there are things that he learned in that locker room and being a quarterback of this football team that's going to help him in Indianapolis and that he could do better.
Hey, yeah, I love it. Like I said, I know all quarterbacks have egos, and I'm a guy that says where there's smoke, there's fire, but I never believed it to the extent of what they're saying. I just think that, you know, things could have been handily different. But like you said, in situations in our life, we always look back and say, you know what? I could have did that better. I could have went out of my way and did something, even though it's not my first instinct. It's just a better thing to do. So he will learn from that. And the Colts players we're definitely welcoming him.
Yeah, they were. You know what you're going to hear now, Mike? You know what you're going to get now? Now that he's gone, now you're going to have more character assassination, because he don't defend himself. He didn't do it the whole past 2 months when people were talking trash about him, because he's a man of character. He's a man of integrity, and he's not going to go out there and badmouth anybody. He's not going to criticize anybody. So now you're going to get leaks and false information and misleading stuff put out there to paint this picture. I think it's only going to get worse. You're going to hear so much stuff that's just nonsense, because he's never going to say anything otherwise. But like you said, in Indianapolis, they've already welcomed him with open arms. I see him already posting a couple players on defense, right? We're screenshotting their phone calls and the texts from Carson and posting them up there.
Yeah. And again, word travels in the NFL. When you're a trash talker, when you're a guy who's like a dirty player on the field, when you're a locker room cancer, that travels. You would have saw a different embracefulness from the Colts if he was such this guy that they're like, wow, now we got to deal with Carson Wentz. So you can see right there goes to show that at least whatever the Eagles are saying, it don't feel like that in the NFL. But hey, I agree. I do have one more last question. Howie is on his last year of his deal, I believe, right? This is the last year of Howie's deal. I heard.
I haven't heard if there was an extension for Howie. You know what? 2021. I got to look into that, man. I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Well, let me ask you this.
I know Doug had two more, and I thought they were together. So I thought Howie was also two more, just like Doug. So now you got me questioning. I got to do some research. But if you're going into, does that mean if he's on the last year or if he's on 2 years, I don't see Howie going anywhere. I just don't. I think the relationship with Jeffrey Lurie is so close, so tight. When you see Jeffrey Lurie not holding Howie accountable, I think he looks at and like a lot of times people are so critical of Howie because of the draft only. But there are things Howie does well. There are certainly things that he does well. One of those things is how he controls the narrative and spins stuff through the media. He's a master at it. He's a genius at that. He can get his story out there the way he wants it because he'll tell people who are trusted sources, even if it's not necessarily the truth, and they'll put it out there and everybody buys into it anyway. So he's really good at certain aspects of his job. I think the draft issues, they're well chronicled. We know all about the draft issues, but that's something that they got to address, and whether it's bringing in help or whatever it may be. But I don't see him going anywhere, man. I just don't.
Yeah, that was my thing. My whole outlook on it was like, if his contract is coming up and we really botch the next year or 2 years, then maybe Lurie says, you know what, instead of extending you or firing you, we'll just make it, because I know Lurie and Howie's relationship is good. I think if we would botch, like go back to back picking in the top 10, maybe Lurie says, listen, we can still have a nice relationship, but mutually part, so it doesn't really hurt Howie's name. But I do agree. I could see him being, I'm 55 years old and still talking about how Howie Roseman's the GM. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. But like I said, thank you very much for coming on, my guy. Appreciate you.
You got it, man. Anytime. Appreciate it.
With that being said, thank you for all watching. Hopefully y'all liked. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.